I'm going to start the first brief video on death and dying, and that appeals to the rebel in me as well as the, I suppose, as being sensible. After all, we have a natural fear of dying. Anybody who loves this life must sort of have some sort of concern about it ending. It's just natural. And we have a natural fear because it's important that we don't do things silly. We don't rush out into the middle of the motorway without looking, or jump out of an aeroplane without a parachute.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's pretty important that we have a natural fear of death. However, what's happened is become a taboo subject, in other words, and that will create more fear and uncertainty. And I know you have, and I have worked with many who have died or been dying process. In the vast majority, there's a natural process that's happening, not different from somebody who's tired at the end of the day who's going to sleep. And we don't fear that. We don't fear that. Well, we don't know we're going to wake up in the morning. So there's a similarity there. And so for the majority of people, there's a process. And when I was involved in hospice work, a lot of my energy was taken up actually helping those who were fearing the process, the family, and sometimes the staff. Whereas in the vast majority of cases, the process was a peaceful one. And in a way, for me, a very enriching one, an enriching one for the family. I also saw the veils between, as somebody dies, the veil is lifted between this world and maybe other connected realms. And so, it's not unusual for the dying person to meet loved ones that have passed, and some that haven't, and experienced realms that beyond, as that veil's become lifted and as they lose, as the grip in fact is lost on this material world. And that's when there's agitation, as we feel losing it as well. Children, report this, and of course children don't sort of feel they have to bow down to convention, so they say this as well. And we're also hearing wonderful, I suppose what I call wonderful stories of near-death experiences of people who are sort of knocking on the door and coming back. And we know science is showing that they're, by all intents and purposes, their brains have been switched off, and yet they're still experiencing these things. So we're understanding that there's a consciousness beyond just what our brains produce. But it may well be that our brains filter out a lot when we're in our thinking mode. And then when we're in a relaxed mode, in a creative, joyful, laughing mode, we become much more open to these dimensions, and the same as when we die. So again, we've been maybe conditioned into seeing dying as not only a tragic event, which often it is, of course, but as a violent event. And unfortunately, that's what the media and Hollywood, me, amongst others, has tended to portray. But I think there's a time to reassess that. And we don't know what happens when we die, and there's no evidence that when our consciousness isn't going to survive, and we're going to be set free into a wonderful space, a timeless space, which is better than the biggest laugh we've ever had here, And the music might be the best we've ever heard, and we've just filtered all that out. I think we filter into these wonderful dimensions, which is I'd see as, when I look around, I see a miracle of these dimensions. But we just don't know these things. And I suppose it upsets me a bit when such views are patronised as somehow wishful thinking, and people who haven't made it here effectively, materially, and therefore are wishing for other things. And I think that has to be counteracted, and I think that those views have to be put in their place. And by doing that, I see that we start living better, because with a cloud of fear over us, I don't believe we're living to our full potential. So the discussion about this is healthy, very healthy, and so we'll open that up as well. Okay. So we're going to start with death and dying, which is maybe where we would start. I don't know.
There's been some recent stories you probably have seen with Buddhist relics and Buddhist bodies actually clinically being determined as dead.
Yes.
And I think one was something like 10 days post that clinical determination. There were rigor mortis didn't occur, and a range of other things that typically signify once the body's done, which really causes you then to question all that has preceded in the practice of that Buddhist person.
Yes, yes.
What has it created in the physical form as well as in that other form? And then more recently they found the remains from, I think, about 80 years ago.
Yes.
From the 40s.
Yes.
Another monk who was incarcerated in a sitting meditational position, and again hadn't been embalmed, but no deterioration. So fascinating.
It is fascinating. It also shows that maybe meditation is those who get joy out of meditation, and they do, from the sort of relinquish that sort of peace. In fact, that may be an insight into this other state that we may be perpetually in. I don't know. And there's those senior doctors now who are coming out, if you like, with their experiences, like Dr. Ibn Alexander and Professor Stevenson over the years, who's passed since, but whose life study was investigating evidence of reincarnation and others, and it's very healthy that we look at this as well, because the people coming to see me as a doctor are often aware of this as well, and want to be listened to. And I have many that are with what we would call terminal illnesses, which is, maybe we should revise that word, who have far less fear than some of the people who are looking after them, and treating them, and in fact desperately want to tell these people not to look so worried, and of course that is that can drain them somewhat. That can drain the person who hasn't got a lot of energy to feel they have to sort of support the person who should be supporting them as well. So there are huge reasons why I should start at this point as well.
Yeah. I think too, every time we step out and we get an answer, so it gives us some meaning.
Yes.
It invariably also reinforces our purpose.
Yes.
And there are a number of people out there who still aren't clear on what am I here for.
Yeah.
What's this all about? How do I make sense of this? And when we can look back and reflect on a series of events and see how they have created us.
Yes.
And where we sit now, and then the work we can do, that can be profound. So our engagement with others can be very much delivering into that space too.
Yeah, I think it is. I know that when I start talking about this and reading about it, I feel this sense of peace, and I don't totally understand why I feel like that when I look at it. And it's certainly not just wishful thinking, because it's not about thinking so much, it's that sense of peace. Just like when in a situation within the hospice, some people would say, "Did you find that depressing?" And I didn't. I found it actually sparked my creativity for some reason. Well, for reasons that maybe it opened us up. But it also allowed us to engage with people beyond, let's say, their ego, In modern parlance, there was less bullshit talked. You know that, and because why bother? And with that, there was some joy. There was a lot of joy, wasn't there?
Yeah.
You found that too?
Yeah. Even communing. I remember I specialed a man who was very, very badly burnt for 6 months.
Yeah.
and to day by day be in that vulnerable place and help him manage his pain. And move through that, you know, the disfiguration, the whole thing. What a treasure.
Yeah.
And it was interesting that you asked, you know, people say, you know, don't you get depressed by that? And 16 years nursing, and no, I never was depressed.
And the same with people with chronic illnesses or problems or whatever, that you know that you can only be helpful if you're authentic, and they can only be helpful if they're authentic back to you. And I think that what drains us more is when people are playing games. In other words, they're playing games of not nice games. I love playing games with you, basically. You know what I mean. But when they're not being truthful, and that's what I'm trying to say for that. When they're saying what they think they're supposed to say rather than what their hearts are saying as well. And that is the joy and the authenticity of this. And getting back to some state of new consciousness, I think that's the authenticity is the cornerstone of this, because then you are allowed to be yourself, and you're allowed to, and that doesn't mean being perfect in this material world. It doesn't, you know, it's not about perfection at all. The great artists, the great comedians, the great actors, the great everything, everybody show the ones that show their vulnerability.
Absolutely, I was just going to lead to that.
And their shadow and